There's Gamma Ray. That song was The Spirit off of Sigh No More. I'm Ken the Metal Professor, and you're listening now to the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program. You had 2 songs worth of mostly metal, so I hope those of you that like metal enjoyed those tunes. Next week, there will be plenty more metal. But this week's show is mostly dedicated to all of my fellow wrestling fans. So the first hour was taken over by wrestling, and the rest of this hour is also taken over by wrestling, and in fact taken over by 2 specific individuals. I had the pleasure of talking to Abel Robles, and a marginal pleasure talking to Luis Rojas. Those guys always travel together. You never see one without the other. They were unable to be in the studio so we could talk live tonight, so he was kind enough to stop into the studio yesterday, and we got to talk for quite a while. And so you'll hear me talking to Abel Robles from now until about halfway past the hour, and then Luis Rojas will get on the microphone at that point, and who knows what to expect. Mostly talking about an upcoming wrestling show down in Crawfordsville on December 15th. NGW, New Generation Wrestling, is putting on their winter or Christmas special on that date. And certain things are coming to a head at that event, including a situation between Luis Rojas and Jeremy Hadley. And so you'll hear Abel Robles just talking about his history in wrestling, and then I'll jump back in to yap a little bit, and then you'll get to hear Luis Rojas for a while after that. Normally, I've been doing also a little segment in my show here on WVLP called Ken's Dark Corner, where I also indulge myself in my hobby of horror movies. And I made a 12 weeks in a row until this week when I decided to leave it out just for the sake of space. But next week, Ken's Dark Corner will be back, and I will tell you about more Puppet Master movies. There was a recently, from 2010 through 2017, a run of 3 that formed a trilogy, and I'll tell you about those. And now that I have an extra week in there, I may actually get a chance to watch and report back on the very newest Puppet Master movie that just came out this year. So you'll have that to look forward to, or not, next week. But for now, until halfway past the hour, just sit back, relax, and listen to the stories told by Abel Robles about his life in wrestling. This is Ken the Metal Professor, and I have a special guest in the WVLP studios today. It's Saturday. We're doing this in advance of the Sunday night Mostly Metal and Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program. It's better for everybody's schedule to do it like this, and I'm pretty sure that my guest really enjoyed driving up from Lafayette, was it, in this really cruddy weather?
Wasn't bad.
Okay, that's good.
No snow.
So sitting with me across the table here is Abel Robles, and he is a worker in several of the regional wrestling promotions that I like to go watch and cover as part of this hobby of mine. And so he's nice enough to come in and sit down and tell me some things about what's going on. So I think the first time I ever saw you perform was at a Fire Pro Wrestling show.
Oh.
And it was at the Porter County Convention Center. So it was this weird daytime. There was a double bill. There was one set of 3 matches, and then a break, and then another set of 3 matches. And this was probably about a year and a half ago.
October 14th, 2017. I remember it because I wrestled 4 times that day. Yeah.
That's a good memory.
Yeah. We that was one of the last few. It may have been the last Fire Pro show that ever took place at the moment. But we wrestled like the bookers. It was a strange day because the bookers were supposed to be there a little earlier. They weren't there. So a lot of us guys just kind of took it upon ourselves to make the card ourselves. Hey, you wrestle him, I'll wrestle him, and then, okay, we'll take a break, and then we'll go on and make sure we get a few more matches in there. This guy wrestles that guy. Hey, then we'll throw on a 6-man tag to end the show or whatever. So it was a fun and interesting day. And then we turned around later that night and went up to main event as Luis Rojas and the Warfare Jeremy Hadley. We main evented as the Uprising against the Top Guns up at Backbreaker Wrestling's inaugural show. So that's what kind of highlighted the day for us. I mean, Hadley and I, as the Uprising, we were tired. Yeah, we were. But the moment we stepped outside the curtain, we were on fire. I mean, we were alive again. We just the energy hit, and I mean we had fun the first half of the day, but that second half of the night just blew our minds. It was awesome.
Yeah. So well, let's talk about Backbreaker a little bit, because I've covered I've visited several of their shows, and I've actually been there with this, all this gear stuff to cover the show and play some sounds from it for the audience later on, and it's been a lot of fun. How does that promotion stack up against other ones in the area that you've been with?
It's like, well, we'll get into this, like I said, a little bit more, but two of my favorite promotions of all time was BMF Wrestling Alliance down in Lafayette from about 2008 to 2010. And at that same time, we were starting to come on strong at Fire Pro Wrestling. The same time, because the locker rooms in both places I thought were the best I've ever been in to this day. Backbreaker Wrestling is like a continuation, because Sean Spinks runs Backbreaker Wrestling, but he also had a hand in, at that time, running Fire Pro Wrestling's backstage stuff. Just a super great guy. Him and his wife, Lynn Marie, she was my manager at the time, back in 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. And they run a tight ship. I remember that going back to the October 14th of last year, and his opening speech to kind of get us going before the show, and saying he had handpicked everyone in that locker room because at some point they had meant something. He had basically he scouted everybody and made sure they had the proper personality. They weren't full of themselves. And that's the kind of locker room I like to be a part of. And that's what Backbreaker is to me. It is one of the funnest locker rooms I've ever been in. I will probably ever be in, because Sean runs such a tight ship. He doesn't let anyone get out of check. Everyone there has always stayed in check. I don't think I've ever had a bad thing to say about a single guy in that locker room. They all bust their behinds. They're all so professional. So much joking going on, backstage or whatever. Just a really cool group of men and, women, but, Lynn's the only one at the moment that's there, on the female side. But, I mean, just a super cool, awesome group of people. I mean, you just, everyone stays after, pitches in on tearing down the ring, and so that also builds up that camaraderie. Some of the us vets, we're too good to tear down the ring. Hey, it's no problem, because it's such a cool group of guys. And everyone, no one goes hiding off and saying, "Oh, I can't help, I got to go do this." No, everyone pitches in. Sean has some words of encouragement. After the show, he meets with each talent and discusses with them what he liked about their match, maybe where the future holds for them. And good words of encouragement. And it's not just, he's not just, puffing people up. He's being legit, honest. You could tell it in his voice. You look him in the eye, you could tell he means what he says. And that's what, you cannot ask for a better promoter than, we'll talk about NGW Indiana here in a little bit. Paffo's the same way. He may not always like what he has to say, but he'll be straightforward, honest with you. He won't sugarcoat anything. He'll tell you, hey, he won't, say, "Oh, you suck," but he'll tell you, "Hey, that wasn't your best performance." And that's what, I expect from Sean as well. He'll tell you, "Hey, this could have been better maybe, and such and such." But he always, he just, you leave his promotion every night that you work for him knowing that, hey, you're wanted there. You were specifically asked to be there. You weren't just like, "Oh, hey, I guess that talent's available. Let's just go ahead and bring him in." He scouted every one of us. He likes his locker room the way he, he runs a tight ship. He does not sugarcoat anything. He is just, just a super cool man. Just a good human being. I like working for people like that. I don't like the shady people. Don't lie to me. There's no reason to. Sean doesn't do that. Paffo doesn't do that. For the most part, I don't think anyone that I've worked for recently has ever done that to me. So I guess in the roundabout way, that's what's great about backbreaker wrestling. So,
And even from my perspective, I've noticed. So I obviously from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
But I get to peek a little bit.
Yeah.
At the goings on because if I'm doing the coverage, I can come in early and set up my table and get everything ready. And I try to stay out of the way, but I can just watch. And also, some people come over and react to me, and some of the friendliest people have been at Backbreaker and NGW and also ACW.
Yeah, that's another place I want to go to because I like a lot of the people there. ACW, run by another group of awesome people. I know Derek has something to do. I don't want to use his worker name. I don't know if he feels comfortable with that. Derek, Brian, I think has some stuff to do with it. Really cool guys. Probably two of about 4 or 5 different guys that are like my favorite guys to talk to backstage at any of these shows, whether it be NGW. If I see him at Backbreaker, we talk there. Definitely, like I said, even if I'm not working at an ACW show, I just love to be there to watch as a fan. It would just be it will be something I do in 2019.
Sure. So Lafayette is kind of your home base, and you've been working regionally for how long?
13 years.
Wow.
October of 2005 is when we had our first match. Came out of a class of with the Warfare Jeremy Hadley, who I might as well put out here that he's my shoot brother. Jamie Crisis. Mark Houston, which, shout out to Mark Houston. He's doing stuff out in Denver, out in Colorado, for Rocky Mountain Pro, I think it's called, for Vince Russo and all that stuff. He's even going up north, in Canada and doing some stuff there as the Axemen. But, shout out to him. There are a couple other guys in there. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my old Uprising buddy, Matt Cross, Xavier Cross. His real name is Matt, but I think he's retired now, but he lives down in Tennessee. But a good guy, just a really good guy. But yeah, and there's another guy named Dave, cool guy. I haven't talked to him in years, but so we came out of that class of 2005. We were trained by Sexy Sean Cook, Billy Rock, Guy Lombardo also, he did some of the training. It was under Sean and Guy's umbrella of CWF that we started, but Billy Rock did a lot of the training as well. Sean and Billy were like the two main ones.
And this was the School of Rock?
No, this was actually CWF training. Same one that Poffo came out of. He actually came out the year before us. And so, but yeah, it was basically Sexy Sean Cook and Guy Lombardo owned the place, and then like their next in command, their main co-trainer was Billy Rock. Okay. So that at some point, he turned it into the School of Rock once, Sean and Guy were out of it as far as they're in Lafayette. So
what promotions are you most active with currently? So I see you in NGW fairly regularly when I make it down there, and Backbreaker, as you mentioned. What else? That's
pretty much it, to be honest with you, because I went on hiatus. I won't get too personal into it, but I lost a fiance back in 2016 from uterine cancer. So at that time, before that, in 2015, I kind of took some time off, and then to spend some time with her, and then eventually she passed in April of 2016. So it was probably late 2016 is when Poffo had kind of put the feelers out that, hey, even if you're not ready to wrestle, if you want to come help me book and give me some ideas or whatever. So eventually in 2017 I think is when I finally took him up on the offer, started getting a little bit more involved in wrestling because a year had passed then. And then eventually he asked me to team with another guy who was looking for a partner, that being Jason Levi. We did some tag stuff together, and then, like I said, from then on, I was like, okay, I need to get back in. I need to involve myself with something. And they were, I was helping with them, and then Sean had called me one day when I was flyering for NGW. I was with Poffo, and Sean had called me and asked, hey, I'd like to put you and Hadley together as the Uprising, and you guys come wrestle this team. He told us who the top guns were. And, he's like, I don't even remember if he told us that at that time that we were going to main event, but he knew that, we definitely had a role there. He wanted us and asked if I was interested. I was like, yeah. So from then on, it's pretty much just been those two. I've wrestled some at CWF down in Carthage, Indiana, which is down it's like east of Indianapolis, probably about 20 minutes east of Indianapolis. But like I said, I mean, for the most part, just those three. So I may take up one here and there every so often just to get some work in, just to kind of keep the ring rust off. But for the most part, I'm happy with just those two. I mean, because I do help with the some of the backstage with the promotion stuff for NGW Indiana. So, but I mean, as far as backbreaker, I just enjoy going up there. Even if I weren't booked, I'd go out there, hang out with the boys. Sure. It's that awesome of a locker room. It really is. So.
What's the farthest distance you've ever traveled to do a show?
We did. It was actually our first few months in the business. That group of guys, I think one of them. Let's see, we had Houston, Hadley. I think Jamie was with us. There was like out of the 6 guys I mentioned, I think only one that wasn't involved in. We did like a 6-man tag or something down in it wasn't Evansville, it was Madison, Indiana. So just right on I think it's right on the border of Kentucky. So it's basically like southeast Indiana. Right. So
like Clifty Falls, I think.
Yeah, so that's I'd say probably the furthest we get. So I haven't really as much traveled out of Indiana. I just, it's great. Some young guys. It just never was at the top of my list. It was like, I know what my talents are. I know I don't do a whole lot of flippity floppity stuff. I think I'm entertaining to watch. But at the same time, I also know there's a lot of great talent out there that does so much more stuff, and I'm happy being in my little pond over here and over there, and I don't really step out of my comfort zone at the moment. I'm more these days. I'm more into the backstage stuff and creative than I am actually out there in front of the crowd. So
okay. Well, here's generic question number 4. What made you get started in all of this?
If I wanted to go back to when like wrestling, I'll kind of wrap that up. I won't make that too long, but I first noticed wrestling back it had probably been February or March of 1990 when I was just kind of flipping through the channels as a kid, and saw this guy in a yellow and red shirt. You know what, brother? Promoting WrestleMania 6, because then also on that same show you'd see the guy in the cool tassels and the colorful look and all jacked up, and I was like, wow, what is this? Then wrestling, and then sure enough, I had a little brother at the time. Hey Jeremy, check this out. He was like, oh, that's kind of cool, but wasn't as much into it as me. And then fast forward all these years later, we used to run, here it is, let's say 90, 98, 99, 2000. Well, even before then, we were doing stuff like pull out my mom's pull-out couch or whatever and wrestle matches on there. And then fast forward to 2000 when I had my own apartment, we had a mat we'd throw there and we'd do like 2-man shows, like basically, have 7 or 8 matches on a card or whatever, and then hey, we'll wrestle 4 of them today, as a I hate to use the name, but Chris Benoit or Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, all these fast, and then some we take some independent guys, independent names we saw on the PWIs or whatever, and we throw those in there and say, hey, let's how about Ace Darling? You be Ace Darling, I'll be Blue Panther, or and so here we are doing 2-man shows of like 8 to 10 matches. Okay, hey, on Saturday we'll do these 4 or 5 matches, and then the second day we come back and we'll do these other 3 or 4 matches and finish it off. And we'd be exhausted, trying to do what we saw on TV. So then, fast forward 2005 is when, or actually 2004 is when Jeremy said that his friend Jamie worked with a guy at Nature's Farm there in Lafayette that was training to be a wrestler at the time. That man was Lawrence Bompafo, Larry Hughes, yeah. So Larry and Jamie were working together. Jamie was passing on that information to Jeremy. I was living in Indianapolis at the time. but he said, hey, this guy is running this wrestling school. I went to check it out. You need to come check it out, see what he says, see if you can afford it, and I think we should do it, So we met with him, and I was like, dude, let's do it. It's a lifelong dream, because by then, to be honest with you, come 2004, I was kind of waning a little bit. I was like, this wrestling thing, it just, But then that happened, that chance meeting, kind of brought me back in, and from then it's, the rest is history, So,
That's
as you
good.
can tell, I like to talk a lot.
Well, your next big event coming up is on December 15th.
Correct.
Which will be the NGW show coming up. And we'll be talking pretty soon about, in detail about what's been going on there and what your role is. Before we head in that direction, is there any information that you want to give out to folks in terms of if they want to contact you social media wise or keep up with what's going on?
As far as shoot wise, Abel, ABEL, if you just type in those 4 letters, if you see Abel Robles, I think my current picture is like me sitting in front of a drum set. So I just, as a hobby, trying to learn drums. I suck at it. I have no problem saying that.
That rock and wrestling connection.
Yeah. But I'm trying to do that or whatever. So if you want to go to Facebook, you can find me under Abel Robles. I'm on pretty much everything but Twitter. I'm on Snapchat. I think I'm Robles 78. I think Robles Pickens, Robles _ Pickens. I think on Instagram. I think I have 2 Instagrams. One is more active than the other because I forgot the password for the other one. So, but like I said, for the most part, I do a lot of my stuff on Facebook. I maybe post to Instagram once every couple weeks, and then Snapchat a couple times a week. It's mostly sending messages back and forth, playing with people, and chatting that way. So, like I said, yeah. Find me on Facebook. It's pretty easy find. So
okay, well that's good. We've been, believe it or not, we've been chatting for 20 minutes already.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
This time goes by fast. So we'll take a little break, and then we have somebody else is going to step to the microphone.
Yeah,
Mr. Luis Rojas, and I just wanted to make sure that you were able to talk about what you wanted to before things get out of hand.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, that Luis Rojas guy, man, freaking. He could be a little annoying at times, he thinks he means well. He doesn't. He's kind of a jerk. But he wants to come in here, promote his little match for December 15th. And, he says, what? I don't know. I guess he has something. He's pointing to his phone saying he's got some message or whatever. So I don't know. I'll let him talk about it when he gets in here. So, okay. Mr. Ken, I do want to end this way real quick.
Absolutely.
Quick 30 seconds. I do want to thank you because I do see you at the shows. I do appreciate you coming down from all the way up here down to Crawfordsville. I do see you at Backbreaker. I appreciate the effort you make to go to some of these independent shows and show your support and get your followers to maybe come out there. So I do appreciate you. I appreciate Neil Snyder. He's another guy behind the scenes, unsung hero that does that's starting some social media stuff for us. Kristen, she's a fan of NGW Indiana. She just started the Twitter account. You know more about the Twitter if you want to plug that, because like I said, I'm not a Twitter guy.
Sure, it's New Generation Wrestling Indiana, and I did notice on Facebook and also on Twitter they had to add Indiana, so I'm guessing they're not the only promotion, at least countrywide, called New Generation Wrestling.
Yeah.
And the Twitter handle is at NGW_Indiana.
There it is. So, but I do want to thank you for having me on, and even let me thank you in advance for having this jerk on this coming next. So
I was going to say thank you. I appreciate that, and those nice words probably wouldn't be coming in the next few minutes. Here. So we'll take a break. We'll let Luis Rojas step up to the mic and sit in the chair, and we'll talk very specifically about what's going on with NGW and what we can expect at this next show. And maybe I can talk him into playing a game of 10 questions. We'll see how that goes.
We'll see. I'm sure it'll be a game.
Quick break. You're listening to the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program here on WVLP 103.1 FM in Valparaiso, Indiana. You can listen on the FM dial at 103.1 or WVLP.org or the TuneIn Radio app. We are in the midst of a whole bunch of wrestling audio that I gathered together over the weekend. The first hour was coverage from a live show on Friday, and then the second hour has mostly been dedicated to an in-studio interview I did yesterday. And you just heard me talking with Abel Robles, and next up you're going to hear me talking to Luis Rojas about what he thinks about the things that have been going on with him and Jeremy Hadley, which are coming to a head at New Generation Wrestling's show in Crawfordsville on December 15th. Now, right there at the end of the interview, you heard me mention that I might be able to get Luis Rojas to play a game of 10 questions just for a little bit of fun. And I actually did. But if I left it in the interview for this live broadcast and or this replay on Wednesday night, the show would have run way over. So I did snip out most of the 10 questions. However, as you may know, whenever I have interviews or wrestling, episodes of the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program, I put them on the NWIWRAP YouTube channel. And when I put this on the YouTube channel, I will leave in the 10 questions. And it was kind of fun, so you might want to check that out. Just go to YouTube and search on NWIWRAP, Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program. So without further ado, I'm sorry to do this to you, but you're going to listen to Luis Rojas with some factual and some somewhat through rose-colored glasses on his part interpretations of what's been going on with him and Jeremy Hadley. Welcome back. This is Ken the Metal Professor. You are listening to the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program on WVLP. Good thanks to Abel Robles for talking to me for a while about his history in wrestling and some of the activities that he's been involved in. And at this point, Mr. Luis Rojas has come in and sat in the chair and stepped up to the mic. And we're going to talk about what's been going on with you at NGW.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for getting that guy out of here. Abel smiles too much. He's too happy-go-lucky and it makes me sick. So therefore, I thank you for having some class on your show. And I just want to state that whatever is said from here on out, Mr. Luis Rojas takes full responsibility. And I apologize for nothing. So go ahead, ask at your own risk. But Ken, you're actually one of the few people that is actually decent enough. Because, hey, you're asking Luis Rojas to be on your show. So I can't complain so far. Go ahead, ask away.
Well, thank you. I will ask away. I have been watching you in particular at the last NGW show, and I've seen you at New Generation Wrestling before. But I was not there for one or two shows in between, a couple that I'd been at, and then there was a gap, and then I was at the last one. And something in between where I'd seen the shows a few months ago and what was going on at this most recent show, something has happened between you and Jeremy Hadley.
Yes.
Can you describe what has been going on that's led to this kind of really high tension between you?
So what has happened is he has betrayed me. See, let me go back. The Uprising, that being the Warfare Jeremy Hadley and Luis Rojas, were the main cogs of that group years ago and have continued to perform as a tag team. Well, at some point, they went their separate ways. Jeremy Hadley went off and did his thing in NGW Indiana, had his success as a heavyweight champion, did all that. Luis Rojas went his way, teamed with a guy named Jason Levi. Everything was going fine and dandy until Jason Levi, quote unquote, had enough of Luis Rojas and decided to dump him. Well, then Luis Rojas decided, I'm going to go out and find this guy over here by the name of Paragon. Young up-and-comer from Ohio. Decided to bring him along. He was aiding me in my battle against Jason Levi. Well, then Jason Levi decides to give me a low blow, so to speak, and go after my old partner to team with him. that being Jeremy Hadley. Jeremy Hadley wasn't supposed to be in the equation. Never was meant to be. Problem is, he did accept Jason Levi's invitation to join him in a tag match against myself and Paragon. Everything would have been fine. Problem is that he got involved in my business. Had it been just a one-off, I would have just a friendly competition, it'd been fine. But then, at the end of that match, he decided to super kick me. And then I turn into Jason Levi, who hits me with his finisher. I get pinned. At the end of the show, after the show was over, I decided a little payback was necessary. Well, then, all of a sudden, Jeremy decides he wants to pay me back, and we've been going back and forth ever since. To the point that I can announce this right now, that Jeremy Hadley and Luis Rojas will be main eventing the NGW Indiana show on December 15th. It's become ugly. I did receive a text from the NGW Commissioner, Nina Valentine, telling us she wanted to end this. In fact, also in that text, I have no problem telling everyone now either, is that I cannot dress in the same locker room as Jeremy Hadley. That's how bad and combustible this has become. I cannot sit in the same room. I cannot even be on the opposite side of the room with 30 other guys in between us. It's not going to work. So I've been told I have a separate dressing area on December 15th. Jeremy Hadley will dress in the locker room with all the other boys. And it's become pretty bad. If I draw blood from that guy, that would be the least of his concerns, because I could send him to the hospital. I could do a number of other violent things that I won't be responsible for. But in a long story short, that he betrayed me, and now I'm going to settle the score. That's simple.
I've been a wrestling fan for a long time, and I have watched tag teams implode before. But for some reason, it seems like this particular situation has gotten a little bit more intense and a little bit more personal than the outfall or the fallout of those kinds of situations before. Is there a particular reason for that this one goes deeper?
Well, the betrayal on my end is that, well, let's put it this way. At this last show, he did something he should have never done. Never done. Normally, when you try to choke out a man, especially like in MMA or wrestling, you're trying to knock him out unconscious. At some point, he's going to come to. He's going to wake up, be a little groggy, but he'll be fine. When Jeremy wrapped his hand around my throat just a few weeks ago at the last NGW show, he tried to choke the life out of me. I don't mean he was going to let go. I think he came to the point where it's just exhaustion. He was just so worn out and so that he let go. Otherwise, I think he would have tried to take my life. I really think my life was in danger that night. So now he tried to take the most precious thing to me. Me. He thinks because I've said his daughter's name a little bit here and there that I've tried to make it personal. He started this, not me. So if Ken, surely you can believe me, and surely all your listeners can believe me, correct?
Perhaps. Now I'll give you a chance here to fill in a blank if you want to. So at the last show, I was there, and my hordes of listeners will have heard the audio recap of the show, and they would have listened to what happened between you and Jeremy at the very start of the event. And you weren't around that event for a long time because you came out first thing as soon as the show started. You came out with the microphone, but before you had a chance to say anything, Jeremy Hadley came out and interrupted you, and basically things exploded from there, and you were asked to leave the facility, and you kind of stormed out with your gear. What were you going to say? Because you didn't have a chance to say anything.
All I was really going to do was say, I'm putting that part of my history to bed. I'm done with Jeremy. I had subsequent, as we call them, promos, subsequent messages after the fact over the last couple months of telling Jeremy, hey, I'm done with this. I'm ready to move on. I need to pursue the NGW championship, maybe the Hoosier State championship, definitely not the tag team championship because I've already conquered that. Jason and Levi did that, which that's probably another thing that's probably a chip on my shoulder is that as the Uprising, they're in NGW Indiana. Jeremy and I never won the tag team championships, and I fault him for that, not me, him. So that weighed a little bit into my decision to go ahead and continue this. He wanted to continue this. I'm like, I'll be more than happy to oblige. So that was pretty much what I was going to do, was say, hey, I'm focused on this title and that title. I don't have time for this nonsense over here. But then he decides, I'm going to tape up my fists and I'm going to fight you. That's a wrong decision with Luis Rojas. It just is. Especially him, that twerp.
Now, in any situation, it takes flint and tinder to light a fire. It takes two people to get a situation to the level that it is at this time with you guys. At the last show, you had mentioned that you had said his daughter's name a couple of times, and I'm pretty sure that when he came out and he was on the microphone and he was mad, he was screaming pretty loudly. I think he might have said something about you going to his house. Was that an exaggeration, or?
I would say I went to his house. If for some odd reason a door may have been locked and maybe I happened to find a way in just to say hello and talk about things peacefully, and it just so happened as I was coming out from behind him, I was going to say, hey, Jeremy, let's talk this out. But he gave me the death look, like he was going to attack me. So I had to strike first, right? Had to. So then, I interrupted in a video he was sending to his daughter. And instead of doing his normal FaceTime, as he says, he was just going to send a video to her. I just wanted to finish the video for her. That's all I did. The next day, I returned to his residence. He happened not to be there. Oops. And I returned his phone, his property, so he wouldn't go whining to the cops that, oh, he took my property, and then, and he's probably not man enough to, defend himself. So he probably would have told on me and pressed charges for me breaking and entering. And so I decided to be a peacekeeper, be nice about it. I returned his property, and we were going to leave it at that, which would have been what I would have talked about in that interview that he interrupted. So it was true, kinda, but my intentions were not to beat him up like I did. It's just he had that look in his eye. He was going to attack me. I have to defend myself, right?
It just happened that way.
Yeah.
So things are coming to a head, and as you mentioned, you just learned from Nina Valentine that you guys will be in the main event of the NGW show in Crawfordsville. Correct. It's at the Crawfordsville Armory, Correct. National Guard Armory, coming up on the 15th.
Yep.
Have you heard anything else? Will there be any special stipulations for this match? I mean, usually when things are as intense as this is, sometimes it isn't just a wrestling match anymore.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because no, there is not a stipulation per se, but it's funny you say exactly what you just said. It is not a wrestling match. It's a fight. Every time I've put up a video or talked about this whole ongoing situation, I've made sure I have not used, I want to wrestle you, Jeremy. I've always said I wanted to fight you. And from what I understand, he said the exact same thing in his stuff. Because I think we all know where this is headed. At some point, there's got to be a line drawn in the sand that it cannot just be a regular wrestling match. It's going to have to be a fight. At some point, I'm sure there will be some sort of stipulation added. If this isn't solved by December 15th, which Nina wants it solved, but, if for some odd reason things continue, then, so be it. But the fact is, we are doing just that. We are fighting. We are not wrestling. Wrestling would mean a bunch of different holds and all that stuff. No. I want at his throat. He wants at mine. If we could, we'd bare knuckle it. But the fact is, you're right. It is not going to be a wrestling match. It is going to be a fight. And it don't matter how many times we got to see each other face to face. Anytime we're face to face, this is going to happen. So I prefer to be done by December 15th. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that is done. That either he decides, I've had enough of Luis Rojas, I want to move on. I don't want a piece of him anymore because he will beat me down each and every time. Or if worse comes to worse, I send him to a hospital. Make him wish he decided not to get in the ring with me and not to fight Luis Rojas. Like I said, I told him before, if he wanted to wrestle, he may have a chance against me. But in a fight, ain't happening.
Now, I had the pleasure of watching the Acme Championship Wrestling show last night that was down in Lake Station. And listeners to this show will hear some of the audio from that either before or after this interview. I'm not sure which yet. But Jeremy Hadley was on that show. And he took on Ray Del Sol, who I'd never seen before. And it seemed like Jeremy had a little bit of an extra edge to him during that match. And I'm guessing that might mean one of two things. One is he's getting himself intensified for his meeting with you, which might be more trouble for you. Or you've gotten in his head and he's panicking. Which one do you think it is?
I would go with option B there, Ken. So now you may say, oh, well, of course he's going to give that answer because he's so full of himself. No. If you know the guy like I know him, just mentioning his daughter's name, which I'm not going to repeat it right here. I should, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep it classy. But just mentioning his daughter's name infuriates him. Just knowing that someone knows him that well, and I know exactly what gets in his head. Why? We ran together for so long. So I know exactly what buttons to push. But you know what? He knows what buttons to push at me. Which he did so at the last show. He's done so beforehand. He attacked me, a couple months ago. He jumped at me I was going out for my match. He ran and attacked me out of nowhere. Did not see him coming. He just, boom, was right on me, attacked me. Had an issue with my back, a sciatic issue because of it. Had to take a little time off, got myself back. So that is another reason, just a little side note on another reason why I cannot stand him. But I know what gets in his head. He knows what gets in mine. We know what gets under each other's skin. So yes, had I been at that show last night, I'm sure neither one of us would have seen the ring because we'd probably been fighting backstage and probably both been asked to leave the building. So that's great that he's intensifying himself. Well, guess what? Goes both ways. I go in the gym, and the first thing I think about is destroying Jeremy Hadley. The last thing I think about as I'm finishing up and I'm tired after an hour and a half long workout, I want to destroy Jeremy Hadley. From the moment I step in the gym to the moment I leave, it's that one train of thought. Destroy Jeremy Hadley on December 15th in Crawfordsville.
So you're clearly highly focused on this. If it's possible, let's set Jeremy Hadley aside for a second.
Sure.
And think past this, if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that this issue with Jeremy Hadley is resolved one way or the other, and he's not the focus of your attention after this upcoming event. You strike me as the kind of person that probably has a list. Who else in NGW might be on this list that Luis Rojas has decided needs a punch in the face?
I won't give exact names, but I will say there's a lot of young guys that are coming up that I don't appreciate them trying to nudge me out of my spot. So any of the young guys that come in, I know that night that I was viciously attacked, blindsided by Jeremy Hadley, I was going to wrestle a young man by the name of Jacob Carter, who's just getting his career started. I definitely like to wrestle him, get an opportunity, an actual one-on-one with no interference. But there's so much young talent in NGW Indiana. I've already washed my hands of Jason Levi. Paragon if at some point we wrestle one-on-one in a friendly competition, a wrestling match, I wouldn't mind doing that. But there's so many young NGW Indiana talent that's coming along that at some point is going to try to nudge me off my nice little pedestal, and I won't appreciate that. So as they come along, those will be the guys I focus on. At some point, I would like to win the NGW championship. I'll probably end up winning the NGW Hoosier State Championship along the way as well, but but I mean, there's just so many other young talent that I want to make sure that they're not trying to take my spot. So it doesn't really matter who. It just matters, when they come along, they're going to meet Luis Rojas one-on-one. They're going to get knocked down. I'm going to end them, brush them aside, ask who's next.
In NGW, you've talked about being attacked blindsided a couple of times by Jeremy Hadley, or let's say from somebody else. Is there anybody on the NGW roster that has your back that will come out to your aid in an event like that?
Paragon was one. I won't say we exactly had a falling out. We just had a disagreement. But to be honest with you, I don't really need it. At this point in my career, I don't really need it. Because if someone is brave enough and bad enough to knock Luis Rojas off that pedestal I was talking about, then they can have it. They've earned it. So if someone is brave enough and they come along and they do that, maybe they'll turn the tables on me. Maybe they'll put me in the hospital. Maybe they'll end my career. I don't know. But if they're brave enough to try and they succeed in it, they can have that spot. I have no problem as long as they do it the right way. Unlike that other guy I was talking about. And don't do it blindsiding me. Do it to my face, in the ring, one-on-one. If you can beat me and you're the better man, you could have my spot.
All right, last one to bring it all home. Would you rather take a clothesline from Drex Odell or a flying elbow from Jeremy Hadley?
I'll give you this, Ken. There are some questions that you hit me with, trick questions. I felt both. I know normally I would choose 9 times out of 10, I would choose Drex Odell's clothesline, because out of anyone I've wrestled in the last several years, he's the one who makes me feel the clothesline the most. Thing is, the only reason I'll give the nod to Jeremy is because I know that if I take it on December 15th, he's going to make sure I feel it. Every last bit of it, as hard as he can land it, and with as much impact behind it. Because I know exactly what this match means to him. Same thing it means to me. It's everything. At this point in our lives, in our careers, this match is everything. We don't know how many other times something like this will main event. I don't know how many times from here on out I'll main event a show. He probably, if I have my say in it, he won't main event again. He won't wrestle again after December 15th. But the fact is that this is our moment, and I know he's going to bring everything he can to that match to end me. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to return the favor in kind. I'm going to bring everything, every punch I land, he'll feel. He's going to know every bit of me. If it has to end that night, I'll know I went out with a bang.
Presuming that either one of you is able to carry on and wrestle again in the near future after this December 15th event. You had mentioned Backbreaker a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Do you know whether or not you're going to be working at Backbreaker Wrestling?
Yes. If assuming I walk away, I'm sure at some point, if Jeremy miraculously walks away, however you say that word,
amazing,
then I know at some point, there you go. if he wrestles again, he'll be there at some point. I know I'll be there at some point. I like the locker room. You know, for those who don't get on my nerves there, I think it's an awesome locker room. But as far as continuing to wrestle, yeah, I'll be at Backbreaker. I may go check out an ACW show. Maybe I'll end up getting booked over there. I don't know. But I know for one thing is that I'll walk in December 15th thinking that that could be my last match. In all honesty, I'll know that I'll walk out. I'll be just fine. But I know that I have to have that mentality to keep me going for the next 2 weeks. Because if I let off that accelerator a little bit, Jeremy will win that match. I'm not going to let that happen. I want him to exit the building, not under his own power. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, just to summarize one last time, we've got New Generation Wrestling Indiana, the show coming up on December 15th.
Yes.
At the National Guard Armory in Crawfordsville, Indiana, main evented by Luis Rojas and against Jeremy Hadley.
Yes.
It's not going to be pretty. I know what you
Absolutely
anticipate the
not.
outcome to be, but like I said, there's a reason that we have the fights.
Correct. I'll give you that. I will give you that.
So who knows? So best of luck, and I hope for good things for Luis Rojas in 2019. Do you have any last words before we sign off?
Nope. Actually, Ken, you actually ain't that bad a guy. You know,
Nice.
You're one of the few guys in the wrestling business that I could actually get. Maybe, as you were saying earlier, if I need someone to watch my back, you think you'd be interested? Never mind. Nah, you just stick to the microphone stuff and doing the radio stuff.
At best,
you're
I'll
awesome
get
at
somebody
it.
with a microphone.
There you go. So, but otherwise, for those Luis Rojas fans out there, you're all amazing. You're all awesome. I would love to say I love you, but I really don't. But just make sure you come out and see Luis Rojas work his magic against the Warfare Jeremy Hadley on December 15th in Crawfordsville. And thank you, Ken, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for yours. And that's a wrap. This closes out the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program. See you on December 15th in Crawfordsville, Indiana.
Adios.
And that'll do it. This has been the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. Next week, the show on Sunday night from 8 to 10 will be back to its normal format, mostly metal for a good portion of it. Ken's Dark Corner, where I'll tell you about some more Puppet Master movies, and Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program, a much shorter version of it, where I will have more details and possibly more audio related to the New Generation Wrestling event coming up on December 15th, and you can look forward to me having delayed audio coverage of that event as well the week afterwards. So thanks for tuning in. Keep that radio tuned to WVLP at all times. And now, for your listening pleasure, we've got Punk Rock Radio.